So let's go ahead and get you guys your dream IT job. So this is a roadmap that I am creating for you guys, so it will help you get the job that you actually want. Now to start off, let's just go over the couple positions that this is kind of going to be about. In IT, it's a huge field, right? And you can have 100 different titles, but to break it down in a simple way, we have the entry level, which is usually help desk. Now, help desk can be named a number of different things like IT specialist or desktop support, this, that, and the other, but we're just going to stick with help desk. Okay, that's what it's kind of called at its core. Usually you're sitting there answering tickets, solving some technical problems. If you work for an MSP, which is a managed service provider, you can get hundreds of tickets a day and just kind of grind your way through learning about how the IT field is going to work right from the beginning. Again, this is entry level, probably can get into it using a high school diploma and a little bit of luck or knowing somebody. And we're going to go into more detail on the specifications, what you would want to get to start in help desk, okay? So after help desk, something in a similar role but a higher level would be something like a system administrator. Again, these terms can mean 100 different things. It's just the nature of IT. A system administrator can just be only Linux, or it can be only Windows. It could be servers. You can have a system administrator role and technically just be doing manager stuff. Okay, it all definitely just depends on the company that you work for. But we have help desk, system administrator. We have a network engineer of sorts, which is usually somebody that only works on networks or works in a data center, something like that. Then we have DevOps, which is the developer operations. This is kind of the middle ground between a system administrator and a developer. And then lastly, we have something like a cybersecurity specialist, which is somebody that works specifically in the security sector of IT. Now, you may be wondering, where do you start? Where do you begin? There's so many different options and paths to actually choose. And how do you approach getting into security or getting into networking or becoming a system administrator? There's so many different paths, and I'm here to just break that down for you to make it a lot easier to figure out on what you should be doing next. Let's start off with talking about your degree, okay? Do you need a degree for IT? No, not really, but it's going to give you a leg up no matter what. So let's talk about it really quick. So for the first job role that I was talking about, help desk, you definitely do not need a degree, although it'll be helpful, right? But help desk, because it's an entry-level position, you can get this just straight out of high school if you're lucky and you know a couple people, or if you're just really IT literate, you know your stuff, you did, like self-studying, maybe you have some projects under your belt in the IT field, and you start applying, and voila, you get your first help desk position. This is not going to be a lucrative salary, okay? You're kind of like a grunt worker, but it'll definitely get your foot in the door. It's actually where I started and worked my way up as a now system administrator. So don't think that help desk is a poor place to start. It's a great place to start, especially if you're brand new to IT and you need somewhere to begin. It's, again, how to get your foot in the door to start kind of increasing your knowledge in the field. So once again, you do not really need a degree for your help desk position. I would recommend certifications, which we will talk about after the degree portion here. Now, for becoming a system administrator, doing cybersecurity, doing DevOps, or even being a developer or a network engineer, you will probably want to get some kind of degree. The one thing I would say is if you start in help desk, get a bunch of certifications and just lots of information, you can work your way up, especially in DevOps, network engineer, or a system administrator. You don't technically need a degree, but huge advantage, absolutely massive advantage. You're going to have a lot more opportunities because you won't get filtered from HR for not having a degree. So if you were able to, start there. So what type of degrees are we looking at here? Now, for all of these, I personally would suggest starting with a computer science degree. Now, technically, a computer science degree is for software engineers. You're going to do tons of coding and stuff like that. But if you're starting in IT, people that hire in IT still consider computer science of one of the main degrees to look at. If you looked at like Indeed, applications for any type of IT position, it'll be something like IT or related degree, or computer science or related degree, right? So a computer science degree would go a long way because it'll allow you to pivot into programming if you ever find the need to. If you're not interested in programming, that's okay. You don't need to do a computer science degree. It is much more difficult, in my opinion, than IT, because there's a lot of math, calculus, and things like that involved with trying to get this. It's not going to be that easy of a task. If you go get a degree in IT, it's going to be a little bit, I don't want to say it's easier, but in my opinion, okay, it is going to be easier. There's less math, less technical things when it comes to trying to figure out algorithms and some crazy stuff like that. You're going to stick with more of the information side of things when it comes to technology and infrastructure, okay? So the two degrees you're looking at are computer science or IT. Then you have the option to go into something like a cybersecurity degree. If you're looking into security, it is going to be the most in-demand thing outside of being an actual developer. Security is incredibly demanding and incredibly competitive, okay? So I would highly suggest, if you were going into security, to start with getting your degree first. And an honorable mention in terms of what degree to get, information systems is great to start with as well. If you don't want to do IT or computer science, information systems is your third option. It will get you in the door into IT, and also it translates very well into a manager type position. So it is still a fantastic degree to go for. So with that really expensive portion out of the way, let's talk certifications, and which kind of like, I guess the whole video is the roadmap into what type of position you are looking for. Okay, up first, help desk. We talked about getting a degree. We don't actually need one, okay? But what do you need to help get you in the door from a help desk position? Because it is, since it's entry level and it can be remote, there's a ton of competition here as well. So to get a leg up on the competition, outside of doing personal IT projects, right? Like that's called HomeLabbing. It's when you set up a server at home and just do a bunch of stuff on there, spin up a server, get a domain controller. I have a bunch of videos on that if you ever wanted to take a look. And doing HomeLabs will help you get a leg up in pretty much any of these categories: DevOps, help desk, system administrator. As you get more advanced, you'd want more advanced projects under your belt, and all of this is going to be called kind of home labbing, right? So if you ever looked up stuff on HomeLabs, I would very highly suggest going into the Reddit forum called HomeLab, and there's tons of people always talking about this stuff. So highly suggest that. But in terms of certifications for help desk, what we're going to want to look at for very entry level is CompTIA. So let's take a look at the paths really quick. So here you could see we have the core skills. We have the ITF Plus, which is the very kind of the introductory to technology. And then we have A Plus, Network Plus, and Security Plus. These are the three certifications that we're really looking for. It's in the IT world, it's called the trifecta. It's kind of corny, but the trifecta is getting these three certifications. Now, help desk technically only needs the A+. That's what you want to start with. When you start to get into the Network Plus and Security Plus, it's a little bit more advanced. You can absolutely do it. You can do it kind of in this order is my suggestion. Always start with the A+, especially if you're brand new to IT. If you're not new to IT, you can probably skip this first one and do the Network Plus, Security Plus. When you start to apply to IT positions, these are the three certifications you will probably see the most, especially as a junior system administrator or in help desk. If you're doing security, you will see the Security Plus on nearly everything. And if you're doing anything network specific, you'll see the Network Plus on nearly everything. I have all three, and anyone in IT might vouch for me here that getting the trifecta will definitely benefit you long-term and short-term on getting your foot in the door for, well, becoming an IT professional. Now we're gonna stick with talking mostly entry level here. So there's a ton of alternatives for the Security Plus, but this is a really good entry level certification. After you get this and maybe your first security position, you can move forth with the 100 other certifications you can get in security. The Network Plus, again, probably the best overall entry-level certification, but you can also get the CCNA, and that is going to be a little bit more hands-on, and it's going to be a vendor-specific certification for networking. And by vendor-specific, it's for Cisco hardware for the most part. A lot of the information does translate to different types of vendors, but it is going to be, again, Cisco specific. So if you, for whatever reason, find yourself that you know you're going to be going into Cisco hardware, then the CCNA is probably a stronger candidate for certifications than the Network Plus. The Network Plus is vendor neutral, which means it kind of applies to everything, which is why it's so good for being entry level. You kind of broaden your horizon on what you can apply for. CCNA is a little bit more niche, a little more specific into targeting Cisco hardware. Now, with that being said, Cisco hardware is absolutely everywhere, and the CCNA is also going to teach you kind of everything that's in the Network Plus anyway. So if you pass that, you're going to know tons of stuff that is going to get you pretty far entry level wise. And then down to the A+ is going to be where your help desk skills really come in. This is just going to be basically Windows operating systems, basic troubleshooting, understand like cables and hardware and things like that. And it is going to be your actual foothold into breaking into a help desk role. So if you combine the A+ with either a degree or some projects like your home labbing that I just spoke about, you should be set. You might need to apply to tons of places because it is very competitive. But you do these things, you will have that big leg up against tons of other candidates, okay? So that's where we are for help desk. Now, if you were becoming a system administrator, like I said, it's a big umbrella term, so it depends on what kind of system administration you want to do. For example, if you want to be in a Linux environment, something that a lot of people get is the Linux Plus, just to prove or get past HR, so you can apply to a Linux shop, you have Linux Plus on your resume, and they will pass your resume through their HR filtering system. There are plenty of other Linux certifications to get, something like Red Hat, and that is, again, something that's very vendor specific, where this is a vendor neutral, okay? It's just talking about all of Linux stuff. The Red Hat certification is going to be talking about Red Hat operating systems specifically. But while the Linux Plus is, again, one of those kind of niche picks if you are going into a Linux environment, if you are a system administrator, I'd suggest just getting all three, the trifecta for the CompTIA certifications. Now, if you're doing network engineer, if you're doing DevOps, if you're doing cybersecurity, again, I would shoot for all three. You should have all three by then, okay? You don't have to get certifications, right? If your knowledge is there, if you have a degree, if you have a lot of experience already, of course you don't need all of these certifications. This, again, is for people that are trying to break into the field. If you were trying to break into a system administrator right out of college or something like that, you would probably be much better off having all three certifications than not having all three certifications, if that makes sense. Now, I'm not going to go too much into these other options here for CompTIA certifications because they're kind of more advanced. It's what you would get down the line, not really entry level. But these cybersecurity certifications are definitely a lot more prevalent, especially when starting to apply to security positions. So those are some things that you definitely want to take a look at. But let's head over to Microsoft, because honestly, the amount of Microsoft shops out there, meaning companies that run Microsoft hardware like Office 365 or Azure, things like that, it's absolutely enormous, okay? So we're going to go over Microsoft certifications and what path you can take in each type of field, if that makes sense. Okay, so before I go over this absolute disaster of certification paths, okay, just to keep in mind, this is one of the best visual representations of Microsoft certifications. It looks like a mess, but I guarantee you if you look anywhere else, it'll look even worse. So this is my favorite little chart for the actual map out of Microsoft certifications. Before we get started, there's an honorable mention here that is not on this list, and that is the MD 102. So there are certifications for Intune, and Intune is basically how you manage the endpoints in the cloud of Microsoft, if that makes sense. And MD102 is really good for positions like help desk, because it is how you kind of manage all of the devices within Intune or the Microsoft Cloud portal. So that is the MD102 or MD certifications. And then if you want to continue down that path, you would go here, which is the MS certifications. So that is my only honorable mention. The rest we can take a look back to our other chart. And now let's go over not all of these certifications, okay, because there's a lot. We're going to go over the ones that I am most familiar with and the reasons why I would go to take these first. So as you can see, this is Microsoft certifications. This is vendor specific. So if you were going into a shop that doesn't focus on Microsoft, which would be like Google Suite or G Suite, or maybe an Amazon shop that's only kind of managing through Amazon infrastructure, and that would be AWS instead of Azure, but they could potentially still have, Microsoft endpoints and use Office 365 to manage everything. So in that regard, you could still utilize these Microsoft certifications. Just because they use AWS doesn't mean they totally rule out Office 365, because most companies will still need their Word, Excel, Outlook, things like that. And so they would be managed through Office Portal, which is going to be kind of where all of these certifications come from. Now, this map is broken down really well, okay? So if we begin our journey inside of Azure, the first thing we're going to want to get is the AZ900. This is going to be your fundamental certification to kind of get you introduced to Azure infrastructure. And it is not very hard to take this exam. It'll take you just a couple weeks, even if you just began your journey of IT. So you could start here and have no issue with passing with just a couple weeks of studying. But after you pass your AZ900, this is something that you can skip if you want. You don't need to take the AZ900. It's just a big suggestion because it'll get you started. You need to figure out if you want to be in this developer section, which is going to be a lot of coding. If you want to be in the infrastructure section, which is going to be a lot of building on infrastructure, virtual machines, kind of almost being like a consultant in cloud architecture, design, things like that. Or we can go into the security area, which is going to, of course, be your cybersecurity section if you wanted to get started in cloud security, specifically in the Microsoft environment. Just remember that this is going to be vendor specific to Microsoft companies. And then we have the AI stuff and the data district. Those are the two that I'm not going to touch on. AI is pretty straightforward. It is the newest certifications in Microsoft, and I'm not too familiar with those, so we're not going to be reviewing them. We're going to stick with these three here. We are going to be sticking with the other options, more specifically the infrastructure side of things, because that is what I am most familiar with. I'm not a developer by any means, so we're not going to be going over the developer section in Azure. I do have certifications in both infrastructure and security because both of these tie in really well with things like being in help desk, system administration, networking, and cybersecurity. Okay, so those are the things that you want to focus on, is the left side of this chart here. Now, if you were more interested in designing the infrastructure in Azure, which is, if you're familiar with virtualization, this is going to be cloud virtualization and networking. Okay, so I would suggest starting with the AZ104. That's your very first certification to get your basic, it's an associate level cert into the infrastructure of Azure, which again is going to start you off with teaching you how to create virtual machines in the cloud, manage them, create routing and things like that. Then from the Azure 104, you can go up to the Azure 305, and that will start kind of taking in consideration a design and implementation of all of the options that you have in the infrastructure of Azure. So those are the two certifications I'd recommend starting with, or kind of honestly, you could probably just do the Azure 104 and then end with the Azure 305. All of these other options here is just Microsoft making things more complicated, but they're all very niche, very specific certifications that a lot of postings and stuff for IT or cloud infrastructure for Microsoft do not involve any of these certifications. It's usually the Azure 104 or 3 or 5 when we're talking about the infrastructure. And almost the same idea with the security side. You're going to start with the Azure 900, like I said, and then go over to the SC 900, which is another fundamental level certification, which is going to only take a few weeks to study for and pass, but it will get you introduced to the security side of Azure. Now here we have a little bit different compared to our straightforward path in the infrastructure side. We can actually do any 3 of these certifications before going for the cybersecurity architect, which is the highest level certification in the security sector. So again, if we're going for Microsoft security specific or cloud security specific certifications, this is exactly what we would do. We would get our 900, we would optionally get the SC 900 as well, and then we would go to either the AZ 500, SC 200, SC 300. You can pick any of them, take a look at the descriptions of each, and then by the time you get the SC 100, you should be well off into your career in cybersecurity. So that's really it for the video. I don't want to go too much into depth because this is supposed to be more so for entry level, and we've gone a little bit past that, but we really discussed what type of degrees to get, what kind of certifications you should start with for entry level, especially when it comes to help desk, system administrator, networking, and security. And there's a few other tidbits that I would like to sprinkle in. For example, if you went into cybersecurity, you can start with help desk and then become a system administrator, get like 5 years of experience, and then start to pivot into different, more specialty, I guess. And then you can start to kind of specialize and pick things. So you would go from help desk into system administration. Okay, so let's say you are now at 5 years in IT. You can start to pivot into this special sector, what you want to specialize in. And that's where I would start to pivot into DevOps or pivot into security, things like that. But a system administrator is someone that wears basically 100 different hats. You're going to be doing tons of different work in each category. You could be doing databases, you can be doing security, you could be doing cloud. It doesn't really matter. So I can say as a system administrator, I have done all of these, and now I'm starting to look into specializing in different sections. So we went over what type of degree to get to start in IT, what kind of certifications we can begin getting, and then kind of went over the vendor specific Microsoft certifications on your path to actually get a job. Now, keep in mind, I did create a couple more videos to help kind of explain how you can maybe pass the Network Plus, the Security Plus, or one of the Azure exams. So I did want to just share my experience with everybody on how I kind of passed all of those exams. So I'm hoping all of these videos would help you guys out a lot. So if you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. I'd greatly appreciate it. And I hope to see you guys in the next video.